My name is Ashley Wilson, and I am 34 years old. I never thought the day I buried the man who raised me would also be the day I lost my brother. Dad might not have been my biological father, but he loved me unconditionally for 30 years. When Ethan stood up at the funeral and declared I deserved nothing because I was not a real child, something broke inside me. I chose peace over money, dignity over greed. If you are watching this, please like and subscribe to support my journey and let me know where you are watching from. This is my story of loss, betrayal, and ultimately freedom. I was 4 years old when Thomas Wilson entered our lives. My mother, Catherine, had been raising me alone after my biological father abandoned us when I was still a baby. I have no memories of him, just a faded photograph my mother kept in a drawer. Thomas was different from the moment I met him. He had kind eyes and a gentle way of speaking to me like I mattered. He never tried to replace anyone. He simply created his own space in my heart. Catherine was working as a waitress at a diner Thomas frequented. According to the story they loved telling at family gatherings, he came in every Tuesday and Thursday just to see her. It took him 3 months to work up the courage to ask her out. Their first date was at a small Italian restaurant, and he brought me a teddy bear, acknowledging from the very beginning that we were a package deal. Within a year they were married, and Thomas legally adopted me. I remember the day at the courthouse when the judge asked if I wanted Thomas to be my dad. I nodded so hard my pigtails bounced. Thomas cried that day, the first of only 3 times I ever saw him shed tears. When I was 6, my brother Ethan was born. I was excited to be a big sister, and remembered peering into his crib promising to protect him. Thomas made sure I never felt displaced by Ethan's arrival. He created special daddy-daughter dates where we would go for ice cream or to the park. He would tell me Ashley, being a father isn't about blood. It's about who is there every day. As we grew up, Thomas treated us equally in every way. He attended my ballet recitals with the same enthusiasm he showed at Ethan's baseball games. He helped us both with homework, taught us both to ride bikes, and gave us the same allowance. When I graduated high school, he cried for the second time, beaming with pride as if I were his biological child. Thomas built a successful construction company from the ground up. He started with just himself, and a truck, eventually growing to employ 50 people. Our family was comfortable, but never extravagant. Thomas believed in working hard and being humble about success. He put away money for both Ethan and me to attend college and bought us each a sensible used car when we turned 18. Despite Thomas's best efforts to treat us equally, Ethan began showing signs of jealousy around age 12. He would make small comments like, "Dad only adopted you because he had to," or, "You are not really a Wilson." Catherine and Thomas always corrected him firmly, but the seeds of resentment had been planted. I tried to compensate by being an extra supportive sister, attending all his games and helping him with school projects, hoping we could maintain the close relationship we had as younger children. As teenagers, the divide between us grew. Ethan became increasingly possessive of Thomas's attention, and would become visibly irritated when Thomas bragged about my accomplishments. When I was accepted to college on a partial scholarship, Thomas proudly told everyone we knew. Ethan barely congratulated me. Despite the tension with my brother, our family unit remained strong. Catherine and Thomas had a loving, respectful marriage that served as my model for healthy relationships. They supported each other through challenges and celebrated 30 years of marriage just before Thomas fell ill. After college, I became an elementary school teacher, fulfilling a lifelong dream. I moved into an apartment, about 20 minutes from my parents, close enough to visit regularly, but far enough to establish my independence. Thomas would often stop by with home-cooked meals or to fix small things around my place. "Just because you are grown does not mean you stop being my daughter," he would say. Ethan took a different path. He dropped out of college after 2 years to work for Thomas's company. Thomas gave him increasing responsibility, hoping to groom him to eventually take over the business. Ethan seemed to thrive in this role, and for a while our relationship improved as he found his own identity within the family business. Everything changed when Thomas was diagnosed with a heart condition at 62. Initially, the doctors were optimistic, prescribing medication and lifestyle changes. Thomas followed their advice, diligently cutting out red meat and beginning a walking regimen. For about a year he seemed to be managing well, though he had slowed down considerably. During this time I noticed Ethan spending more time at the office, ostensibly learning all aspects of the business. Catherine mentioned that Thomas and Ethan were having frequent closed-door meetings, which I assumed were related to business succession planning. I was happy that Thomas was preparing for the future, never suspecting what was really happening behind those closed doors. The call came on a Tuesday morning while I was teaching my third-grade class. Catherine's voice trembled as she told me Thomas had collapsed at the office and was being rushed to Memorial Hospital. I immediately asked another teacher to cover my class and drove to the hospital, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. By the time I arrived, Thomas was in the intensive care unit. The doctors explained he had suffered a major heart attack, and his condition was critical. Catherine was already there, her face pale with worry. I sat beside her, holding her hand as we waited for updates. 3 hours passed before Ethan finally arrived, smelling faintly of alcohol and looking disheveled. "Where have you been?" Catherine asked, her voice strained. "I had meetings I could not get out of," he replied dismissively. "What are the doctors saying?" I explained the severity of the situation, while Ethan checked his phone repeatedly. His detachment struck me as odd, but I attributed it to different ways of handling stress. For the next week, I practically lived at the hospital. I took emergency leave from work and spent days sitting beside Thomas's bed, reading to him from his favorite mystery novels, even while he was unconscious. Catherine would go home to shower and change, but I remained constant. Ethan visited sporadically, always with an excuse about needing to keep the business running. On the third day, Thomas regained consciousness briefly. He squeezed my hand and whispered, "My sweet girl." Those 3 words meant everything. The doctors cautioned us that his recovery would be long and uncertain, but that moment gave me hope. When Ethan did visit, his behavior grew increasingly strange. Once I found him in Thomas's room alone, papers spread across the bed tray. He hurriedly gathered them when I entered. Another time he brought a notary to the hospital, claiming there were business documents that needed immediate attention. Catherine and I thought it strange, but trusted Ethan was handling necessary company matters. On the 6th day, Thomas was lucid enough to have a meaningful conversation. He asked for private time with each of us. When my turn came, he held my hand weakly and said words I will never forget. "Ashley, you have been the greatest gift of my life. From the moment I met you, I knew you were my daughter. Biology be damned. I need you to know that everything I have done has been for both my children equally. I love you, sweetheart." I told him I loved him too, and thanked him for being the father I needed. Something in his expression suggested he wanted to say more, but fatigue overtook him. Catherine was barely holding herself together during this time. As an only child with parents long deceased, she had built her life around Thomas. I became her support system, making sure she ate and rested, handling communications with relatives, and consulting with doctors. Ethan remained focused on the business, claiming someone needed to keep things afloat. On the morning of the 10th day, the doctors informed us that Thomas's organs were beginning to fail. They suggested we say our goodbyes. Catherine was inconsolable. I contacted Ethan immediately, and for once he arrived promptly. We gathered around Thomas's bed. His breathing was labored, his skin ashen. I held his right hand, Catherine his left, while Ethan stood at the foot of the bed. In those final hours, Thomas drifted in and out of consciousness. During one lucid moment, he looked at Ethan and said, "Take care of them." Ethan nodded solemnly. At 7:15 p.m., Thomas took his final breath with Catherine and me at his side. Ethan had stepped out to take a phone call 5 minutes earlier. When he returned and saw us crying, he knew. His response was a curt nod, and I need to make some calls. His coldness in that moment was jarring, but grief manifests differently in everyone. so I did not judge. The next few days passed in a blur of funeral arrangements. I handled most of it, from selecting the casket to writing the obituary. Catherine was too devastated to make decisions, and Ethan claimed to be dealing with urgent business matters. When I asked for his input on the service, he merely said, "Whatever you think is appropriate." Thomas had pre-planned some aspects of his funeral, wanting to spare his family difficult decisions. He had purchased plots for himself and Catherine years ago, and had specified he wanted a celebration of life rather than a somber service. I did my best to honor his wishes, arranging for his favorite songs to be played and collecting photos for a memorial display. Throughout this time, Catherine stayed in my spare bedroom. She could not bear to be in the house she had shared with Thomas. At night, I would hear her crying softly. During the day, she moved like a ghost, speaking little and eating less. My concern for her grew as the funeral approached. The day before the service, Ethan called to inform me that Lawrence Brenner, Thomas's attorney, would be attending the funeral and would read the will afterward at the house. This was the first I had heard of any formal will reading. When I mentioned that it seemed soon, Ethan responded, "The business needs clarity on succession. We cannot wait." His tone left no room for discussion. That night, I could not sleep. Something felt wrong, but I could not pinpoint what. I attributed my unease to grief and the stress of supporting Catherine while processing my own loss. I had no idea that the next day would change everything. The morning of the funeral dawned bright and clear, a beautiful spring day that seemed at odds with the heaviness in my heart. I helped Catherine dress in the black suit she had purchased 2 days prior, her hands too shaky to fasten the buttons. Her eyes were swollen from crying, and she had aged a decade in the 2 weeks since Thomas's collapse. The funeral home was filled with people by 10 a.m. Thomas had been well respected in the community, both as a businessman and as a person of integrity. His employees came in work clothes, something I knew would have made him smile. Friends from his weekly poker game, neighbors and clients, all gathered to pay their respects. Ethan arrived with a woman I recognized as his current girlfriend, Melanie, and a man in an expensive suit I did not immediately identify. They huddled in the corner, speaking in hushed tones, and occasionally glancing in my direction. When I approached to introduce myself to the unknown man, Ethan intercepted me. "This is private business, Ashley. We will handle everything after the service." His dismissive tone stung, but I was determined to maintain harmony on this difficult day. I returned to Catherine's side where I belonged. The service was scheduled to begin at 11, with Lawrence Brenner announcing that the reading of the will would take place at 2 p.m. at the family home. I found this timing unusual, having expected the legal matters to be handled days or even weeks later, but Ethan had apparently insisted on immediacy. As people settled into their seats, I took my place beside Catherine in the front row. Ethan sat on her other side, the unknown man now clearly identifiable as a lawyer by the briefcase embossed with a law firm's logo. The funeral director began with a brief welcome before inviting me to deliver the eulogy. I approached the podium, my hands trembling slightly as I unfolded the paper containing my prepared words. Looking out at the sea of faces, I took a deep breath and began. Thomas Wilson was not my biological father, but he was my dad in every way that matters. For 30 years, he showed me what it means to be loved unconditionally. I spoke of his kindness, his work ethic, his terrible dad jokes, and his unwavering support. I shared stories that made people laugh through their tears and highlighted how he had built not just a successful business, but a legacy of integrity. When I finished, there was hardly a dry eye in the room, except for Ethan's. He sat stoically checking his watch. After the service, people gathered at our family home for a reception. Catherine moved through the crowd like a sleepwalker, accepting condolences with vacant nods. I stayed close to her, making sure she ate something and had water. Ethan spent most of the time in Thomas's study with his lawyer friend and Lawrence Brenner. At exactly 2 p.m., Lawrence emerged and asked for everyone's attention. Many of the guests had already left, but about 20 close friends and family remained. Lawrence explained that at Ethan's request, they would proceed with reading Thomas's will. "Before we begin," Lawrence said uncomfortably, "I want to clarify that this is somewhat unconventional. Typically, we would do this privately with just the family, but Ethan has requested transparency." Catherine and I exchanged confused glances. This was the first either of us had heard about a public reading. Before Lawrence could continue, Ethan stepped forward. "Actually, before we start, there is something that needs to be addressed," Ethan announced loudly enough for everyone to hear. "While Ashley has been a part of our family, she is not actually a Wilson by blood." The room fell silent. I felt heat rise to my face as every eye turned toward me. "Ethan, what are you doing?" Catherine whispered fiercely. He ignored her and continued. "As Thomas's only biological child, I believe it is important to establish that the family business and assets should remain with actual family members." I stood frozen, unable to comprehend what was happening. Lawrence looked deeply uncomfortable, but did not contradict Ethan. "I have discussed this at length with Thomas during his illness," Ethan continued. "He agreed that blood is what matters when it comes to inheritance. I have documentation to prove it." The lawyer who had accompanied Ethan stepped forward, producing a folder of papers. "These documents signed by Thomas Wilson 3 months ago clarify his wishes regarding the distribution of assets." Catherine rose shakily to her feet. "This is absurd. Thomas would never exclude Ashley. She is his daughter in every way that matters." The unknown lawyer responded coldly. "Legally speaking, while Thomas did adopt Ashley, he signed these amendments to his will that specifically allocate the business and primary assets to his biological son." I finally found my voice. "May I see these documents?" Lawrence intervened. "This is becoming inappropriate for a gathering like this. Perhaps we should continue this discussion privately." "No," Ethan insisted. "Everyone here knows that Ashley is not really Thomas's daughter. There should be no confusion about who rightfully inherits his legacy." Friends and family shifted uncomfortably. Some began to gather their belongings, sensing they were witnessing something they should not. Others stayed rooted in place, too shocked to move. "Ethan, please," Catherine begged. "Your father would be heartbroken to hear you speak this way." "My father would want his life's work to stay with his real family," Ethan replied coldly. "Ashley has benefited from his generosity for years. She has had more than enough." The cruelty of his words in front of people who had known me my entire life was devastating. I felt as though I had been physically struck. Lawrence, looking deeply troubled, suggested we move to the study to review the documents properly. As we moved toward the study, I caught whispers from the remaining guests. Some expressed shock at Ethan's behavior, while others seemed to be reconsidering everything they thought they knew about our family. The public humiliation burned almost as much as the betrayal itself. In the study, Lawrence Brenner looked visibly distressed as he placed several documents on Thomas's desk. Catherine sat beside me, her hand gripping mine so tightly, it hurt. Ethan stood with his arms crossed, his lawyer friend at his side. "I want to state for the record," Lawrence began, "that the original will I drafted for Thomas divided all assets equally between his children, with provisions for Catherine's lifetime security." Ethan's lawyer interjected. "However, Mr. Wilson signed these amendments 3 months ago, redirecting the business and majority of assets to Ethan Wilson as his biological son and business successor." Lawrence nodded reluctantly. "These documents do appear to bear Thomas's signature, though I must note, I was not present for their signing, nor did I draft them." "What exactly do these amendments state?" I asked, struggling to maintain composure. Ethan's lawyer explained in clinical terms. The family business, valued at approximately $3 million, would transfer entirely to Ethan. The family home, worth around $500,000, would be sold with proceeds going to Ethan, though Catherine would have the right to remain there for 1 year. Investment accounts totaling nearly $1 million would go to Ethan. Catherine would receive her personal possessions and a life insurance policy worth $250,000. I would receive a token $10,000. This cannot be right, Catherine whispered. Thomas would never do this. Lawrence spoke carefully. While these documents appear legally executed, there are grounds to contest them. If Thomas was under duress or not of sound mind when signing, or if there was undue influence. Are you suggesting I coerced my dying father? Ethan asked indignantly. When exactly were these signed? I questioned. The lawyer shuffled through papers. February 12th. My stomach dropped. That was 2 days after Dad was admitted to the hospital. He was barely conscious then. Ethan shrugged. He had lucid periods. He knew exactly what he was doing. Did you bring these papers to him in the hospital? Catherine asked, her voice rising. When I was at home resting and Ashley was getting coffee. Ethan did not answer directly. Dad and I had discussed the future of the business many times. He always intended for me to take over. Taking over the business is one thing, I said. Cutting me out of his legacy entirely is another. As the discussion continued, I excused myself to use the bathroom. In reality, I needed a moment alone to process what was happening. On my way back, I passed Thomas's home office and noticed the door ajar. Inside, I found Melanie rifling through a filing cabinet. What are you doing? I asked sharply. She jumped. Ethan asked me to find some papers. This room is off limits, I said, entering fully. That is when I noticed a notebook on the desk open to a page with what looked like practice signatures. My heart sank as I realized what I was seeing. I quickly took photos with my phone before Melanie could stop me. When I returned to the study, the argument had escalated. Catherine was in tears and Lawrence was explaining possible legal challenges. I would like to bring in my own lawyer to review these documents, I stated firmly. Waste your money if you want, Ethan sneered. These are legally binding. Over the next few days, I consulted with a lawyer named Sarah Palmer, who specialized in estate disputes. After reviewing copies of the documents, she confirmed my suspicions. The signatures are concerning, Sarah noted. There are slight inconsistencies with Thomas's known signature. Additionally, the timing is highly suspicious. A judge would certainly consider the circumstances under which these were signed. Sarah also explained that Thomas's medical records would be crucial in establishing his mental state during his hospitalization. Given the heavy medications and his critical condition, there was a strong case that he lacked capacity to understand what he was signing. Meanwhile, Catherine's health began to deteriorate under the stress. Her blood pressure spiked dangerously, and her doctor prescribed medication and rest. I moved back into the family home temporarily to care for her, sleeping in my old bedroom that remained unchanged from my high school days. One evening, while looking for Catherine's blood pressure log, I found a handwritten letter from Thomas to Ethan dated 6 months before his death. In it, Thomas expressed concern about Ethan's gambling debts and warned that he would not continue to bail him out. The letter mentioned a final payment of $50,000, with the stipulation that Ethan seek counseling for his gambling addiction. This discovery cast Ethan's actions in an even more sinister light. His desperation for money explained his ruthless grab for the entire inheritance. When I confronted him with this information during one of his rare visits to check on Catherine, his reaction confirmed everything. You had no right to read that, he hissed, snatching the letter. My financial matters are private. Is that what this is about? You have gambling debts. You could have just asked for help, Ethan. You did not have to destroy our family. His face hardened. This is not about destroying family. It is about what is rightfully mine. You have played the perfect daughter for years, but you are not a Wilson. You have no claim to my father's legacy. The cruelty of his words struck deep. I was there every day in the hospital. I held his hand when he died. Where were you? Playing my part, he said dismissively. Running the business he built while you played nursemaid. Anyone can sit by a bedside. Keeping his company afloat actually mattered. Did you even love him? I asked, my voice breaking. Ethan's expression flickered for just a moment before the mask returned. Love does not pay bills. Dad understood business, and he knew his company should go to his son. As he turned to leave, he added, "By the way, you and Mom need to start looking for somewhere else to live. I will be listing the house next month." Catherine, who had been listening from the hallway, stepped into view. "I never thought I would be ashamed of my own son," she said quietly. "Thomas would be heartbroken to see what you have become." Ethan left without responding, the door slamming behind him. That night, Catherine and I sat at the kitchen table, where our family had shared thousands of meals. Friends had been calling all day, most expressing shock at Ethan's behavior. Some offered legal contacts, others places to stay. The community's support was touching, but it could not erase the pain of betrayal. "I never saw this coming," Catherine whispered. "Where did we go wrong with him?" "We did not go wrong," I reassured her. "Ethan made his own choices." "Thomas always worried about his materialistic streak," she confessed. "He hoped involving him in the business would teach him values beyond money." As we talked into the night, I realized the fight ahead would be long and ugly. I had a strong legal case, but pursuing it would mean years of court battles, family secrets exposed, and wounds that might never heal. The thought exhausted me to my core. For 2 weeks, I gathered evidence and consulted with Sarah Palmer about contesting the will. She believed we had a strong case based on several factors: Thomas's questionable mental capacity when the documents were signed, the suspicious circumstances, and the dramatic deviation from his previously expressed wishes. "The process will likely take 18 to 24 months, Sarah explained during our third meeting. "Inheritance disputes between family members typically get ugly. Are you prepared for that?" I thought about the strain already evident in Catherine's health, the community whispers, and the emotional toll of fighting my own brother. "What are the chances of success?" I asked. "Given the evidence, I would say 60 to 70% in your favor. But Ethan has resources now, and he can drag this out with appeals." That evening, I sat alone in my childhood bedroom, surrounded by reminders of the life Thomas had helped build for me. Cheerleading trophies he had cheered for, college textbooks he had helped pay for, and photographs of family vacations, where his smile was always the widest. I thought about what Thomas would want. He had built his business on integrity and family values. Would he want us locked in bitter legal battles for years? Would he want Catherine's health further compromised by stress? Would he want his children to destroy each other over material possessions? The answer came with surprising clarity: no, he would not. I made my decision the next morning. I texted Ethan asking to meet at the family home when Catherine would be at her doctor's appointment. He agreed, probably assuming I wanted to negotiate. When he arrived, I was sitting at the kitchen table with a single sheet of paper before me. "What is this?" he asked suspiciously. "A formal statement relinquishing any claims to Thomas's estate," I replied calmly. "I had my lawyer draw it up this morning." Ethan's expression shifted from suspicion to triumph. "Finally came to your senses, did you?" "Not exactly," I said, meeting his eyes steadily. "I realized that no amount of money is worth what this fight would do to us, to Mom, and to Dad's memory." He reached for the paper, but I held it back. "Before I sign this, I want to be clear about something. I am not doing this because I believe you deserve it, or because I think Dad wanted this. I am doing it because I know continuing this fight would destroy what remains of our family." Ethan shrugged. "Whatever helps you sleep at night." "There is one condition," I continued. "Mom stays in the house as long as she wants, not just for 1 year. You can have the business, the investments, everything else, but she keeps her home." He considered this, calculating the financial implications. "Fine. The house is barely 15% of the total anyway." I nodded and signed the paper. "One more thing. After today, I do not want to hear from you again. Do not call me, do not text me, do not show up at my apartment or my school. Our relationship is over." Ethan actually laughed, "As if I would want to stay in touch with you. You have served your purpose in this family." His casual cruelty confirmed I was making the right decision. "Goodbye, Ethan." As I stood to leave, he called after me. "What about your things? There is 30 years of your life in this house." I paused at the door. "The only things that matter are my memories with Dad, and those you cannot take from me. Sell the rest, burn it. I do not care." Walking out that door was one of the hardest things I had ever done. It felt like leaving not just a house, but the physical manifestation of my identity as Thomas's daughter. Yet with each step down the familiar driveway, a strange lightness began to replace the heaviness in my chest. Catherine was devastated when I told her my decision, but also understood. "Thomas would be proud of you," she said, hugging me tightly. "He always said you had the strongest moral compass of anyone he knew." My friends were less understanding. "He is stealing your inheritance," my best friend Natalie exclaimed when I told her. "You need to fight this." "I am choosing peace over money," I explained. "Dad taught me that some things are more valuable than wealth." Sarah Palmer was professional, but clearly disappointed when I called to withdraw my case. "Are you absolutely certain? The evidence we have gathered is compelling." "I am certain," I replied. "Life is too short for years of legal battles." The next few weeks were difficult. As I adjusted to my new reality, I had to explain my decision repeatedly to well-meaning friends and family who could not understand why I would let Ethan win. Each time I patiently explained that by choosing peace, I was the one winning. I helped Catherine sort through which of my childhood belongings to keep and which to let go. We cried together over photo albums and laughed at forgotten school projects. Through this process of selective remembering, I realized that the true inheritance Thomas had left me could not be measured in dollars. My small teacher's apartment became a sanctuary as I rebuilt my life. I painted the walls, bought plants, and created a space that was entirely my own. Catherine visited often, and we established new traditions to replace the old family gatherings. Sunday brunches at a local cafe replaced Sunday dinners at the family home. Through mutual friends, I heard that Ethan had immediately sold the business to a competitor rather than running it himself. The news saddened but did not surprise me. Thomas had built that company with 3 decades of hard work and personal relationships. To Ethan, it had merely been a price tag. 6 weeks after walking away, I received a text from an unknown number. "You made a mistake. The house has more equity than I thought. I need you to sign papers allowing me to take out a home equity loan." I recognized Ethan's entitlement immediately and replied simply, "New phone, who is this?" Then I blocked the number. That night I slept better than I had in months. 3 months after the funeral, my life had taken on new rhythms. My third-grade students provided daily joy and purpose. I had joined a grief support group that met weekly at a community center where I found others who understood the complicated nature of family loss. My apartment, once sparse and temporary feeling, had become a true home. Catherine had surprised everyone, perhaps even herself, with her resilience. After the initial shock and grief, she had found renewed purpose in volunteering at a literacy program for underprivileged children. "Thomas always believed in giving back," she explained. "This feels like continuing his legacy." She had also begun therapy, working through not just her grief over Thomas, but her complicated feelings about Ethan's betrayal. Although she maintained minimal contact with him regarding house maintenance issues, their relationship had become strictly transactional. When Catherine was diagnosed with high blood pressure that required daily monitoring, I suggested she move in with me. My apartment had a small spare bedroom that could be hers. After some hesitation, she agreed. "Just until I find my own place," she insisted, not wanting to be a burden. Having her with me was actually a comfort for us both. We established easy routines, respecting each other's privacy, while enjoying shared meals and evening television. The household expenses were manageable on my teacher's salary, especially since Catherine contributed from her life insurance proceeds. Meanwhile, through the grapevine, we began hearing troubling news about Ethan. The quick sale of the construction company had apparently yielded less than he expected, after outstanding debts were settled. Several long-term employees had resigned rather than work under the new ownership, and clients had canceled contracts upon learning of the change in management. More significantly, Ethan seemed unprepared for the tax implications of his inheritance. A mutual friend who worked at an accounting firm mentioned that Ethan had been shocked by the estate tax bill and capital gains taxes from the business sale. He thought he would just get $3 million free and clear, the friend reported. He had no idea about the tax consequences of liquidating business assets so quickly. By the 3-month mark, Ethan had begun reaching out indirectly. First came messages through mutual friends. Could I help him locate certain business documents? Did I know the password to Thomas's personal email? Was there a safe deposit box I knew about? When those were ignored, he resorted to more direct approaches. He showed up at my school one afternoon, cornering me in the parking lot as I loaded student projects into my car. "Ashley, this is ridiculous. We are still family," he began, as though the past months had never happened. I made myself clear, "Ethan, we have nothing to discuss." His friendly facade quickly dropped. "Look, there are business complications I did not anticipate. Dad must have talked to you about some of this stuff. I need your help." "You chose money over family," I reminded him. "Deal with the consequences on your own." As I drove away, I caught his frustrated expression in my rearview mirror. For the first time since the funeral, I felt a sense of justice. A week later, a package arrived at my apartment. Inside was a small wooden box I recognized from Thomas's office, along with a handwritten note. "Found this in Dad's desk. It has your name on it." The box contained a letter Thomas had written to me 6 months before his death, apparently intended to be given to me after he was gone. With trembling hands, I read his words. "My dearest Ashley, if you are reading this, I am no longer with you in person, though I will always be with you in spirit. From the moment I met you with your pigtails and missing front tooth, I knew you were my daughter. Biology creates relatives, but love creates family. I have tried to teach you and Ethan the values that matter most: integrity, compassion, and the courage to do what is right, even when it is difficult. Of you two, I have always believed you understood these lessons more deeply. There may be challenges ahead. Ethan has qualities that make me proud, but he also struggles with demons I have tried to help him overcome. If there comes a time when you must choose between what is easy and what is right, I trust you will make the choice that brings true peace. Know that my love for you has been one of the great joys of my life. Being your father has been my proudest achievement. All my love, Dad." Tears streamed down my face as I finished reading. It was as though Thomas had somehow foreseen the choice I would face, and was reaching across time to assure me I had made the right one. The box also contained a bank book for an account I had never seen before. Thomas had apparently been depositing small amounts monthly since my adoption, creating a separate fund in my name. The balance was modest by inheritance standards, about $35,000, but the thought behind it was priceless. When I showed Catherine the letter and bank book, she smiled through tears. He always did have contingency plans. That was Thomas, always thinking ahead. The discovery of the letter and account brought a sense of closure I hadn't realized I needed. Thomas had found a way to leave me both material support and spiritual guidance, circumventing Ethan's manipulations. The irony was not lost on me. Ethan had gained the bulk of Thomas's material wealth, but had lost the family connections and community respect that had been the true foundation of Thomas's success. Meanwhile, I had walked away from millions, but retained everything that had made Thomas truly rich: love, respect, and integrity. In a strange way, we had each received the inheritance that reflected our values. As summer turned to fall, I used a small portion of the unexpected funds to take a photography class, something I had always wanted to do, but never prioritized. Catherine joined a senior travel group and booked her first solo vacation to Savannah, Georgia, a city she and Thomas had always planned to visit together. We were healing slowly but surely, building new lives that honored Thomas's memory without being defined by loss. The money Ethan had fought so desperately for had not brought him the satisfaction he expected, while our choice to prioritize peace over wealth had yielded unexpected dividends of the heart. When my principal asked if I would consider taking on the role of grade-level chair the following year, I accepted with confidence I might not have had before. The challenges of the past months had revealed strengths I hadn't known I possessed. "Your father would be so proud," Catherine said when I told her about the promotion. "I know," I replied, and for the first time, the thought brought more joy than pain. 1 year after Thomas's funeral, Catherine and I stood at his grave with fresh flowers. The granite headstone read simply, "Thomas Wilson, beloved husband and father," with his dates beneath. We had chosen the inscription together, a final affirmation that family transcends biology. "I still miss him every day," Catherine said, arranging the lilies his favorite. "Me too," I replied, "but it does not hurt quite as much as it did." We had both changed in the year since his death. Catherine had moved into her own apartment 2 months earlier, a cozy 1-bedroom in a senior community where she had quickly made friends. She volunteered 3 days a week, had joined a book club, and recently started taking Tai Chi classes. The haunted look that had shadowed her eyes for months after Thomas's death had gradually faded. My own journey of healing had taken unexpected turns. The grief support group I joined initially had evolved into something more, as I recognized how many people struggled with family estrangement and betrayal. With encouragement from the group facilitator, I had started a separate support circle specifically for people dealing with family financial disputes. Finding Financial Peace met twice monthly, in a community center conference room. What began with 5 participants had grown to 15 regular attendees, each with their own story of inheritance conflicts, business disagreements, or financial betrayal by family members. Facilitating these meetings had become one of the most rewarding aspects of my life. My professional life had flourished as well. The grade-level chair position had come with new responsibilities and a small stipend that allowed me to start a modest savings account alongside the one Thomas had left me. My classroom had become known as a place where children learned not just academics but values of kindness and integrity. Thomas's living legacy expressed through my teaching. We had heard little from Ethan in recent months. After his initial attempts to seek my help with business complications, he had apparently accepted that our relationship was truly over. Through mutual acquaintances, we learned he had sold the family home, despite his promise to let Catherine stay claiming financial necessity. By then, Catherine was happily settled in her new community, and merely shrugged at the news. On a crisp October afternoon while shopping at a farmer's market, Catherine and I literally bumped into Ethan as I turned from a produce stand. He looked startlingly different from the confident, well-groomed brother I remembered. His clothes were wrinkled, his hair unkempt, and a certain hardness had settled into his features. "Ashley," he said clearly as surprised as I was, "I did not expect to see you here." Ethan I acknowledged with a nod, turning to leave. "Wait," he called, his voice lacking its usual arrogance. "How is Mom?" "She is well," I replied carefully. "She has moved to Oakwood Senior Living and is quite happy there." He nodded, shifting uncomfortably. "And you? How are you doing?" "I am fine, Ethan. My life is good." An awkward silence stretched between us, filled with a year's worth of unspoken words and unresolved feelings. "Look," he finally said, "things have been challenging." The business sale did not go as planned. There were tax issues, contractual problems. He trailed off, perhaps realizing I had no interest in his financial difficulties. "I am sorry to hear that," I said, not unkindly, but without offering the sympathy he seemed to be seeking. "I have been thinking," he continued, his tone tentative, "maybe we could get coffee sometime, talk things through. We are still family after all." The word family from his lips struck me as both ironic and sad. "Are we? You made it very clear at Dad's funeral that I was not really family." He had the grace to look ashamed. I was under a lot of pressure then. I did not mean half of what I said. But you meant enough of it to take everything Dad built and cut me out completely, I pointed out. I made mistakes, he admitted reluctantly. Things have not worked out the way I thought they would. I considered his words carefully before responding. Ethan, I do not wish you ill. I truly hope you find peace and happiness. But I have built a new life now, one that does not include the kind of relationship we once had. So that is it, 30 years of being siblings and you just write me off. You wrote me off first, I reminded him gently. You cannot shatter something and then be surprised when it cannot be put back together exactly as it was. Catherine appeared then, shopping basket in hand. She stopped short at the sight of her son. Ethan, she said, her voice carefully neutral. Mom, he replied, and I caught a flash of the boy he had once been in his expression. You look good. Thank you. I am doing well. Her tone was polite, but distant. Another painful silence followed before Ethan spoke again. I should go. It was good to see you both. As he walked away, Catherine slipped her arm through mine. Are you okay? Yes, I said, surprised to realize it was true. I really am. That chance encounter proved to be a turning point in my healing journey. Seeing Ethan struggle with the consequences of his choices brought no satisfaction, only a quiet certainty that I had chosen the right path. The wealth he had fought so desperately for had not brought him happiness, while the peace I had chosen had yielded a life rich in purpose and authentic relationships. In the months that followed, I expanded my support group to include virtual meetings for people unable to attend in person. A local therapist volunteered her time once a month to provide professional guidance. What had begun as my personal healing journey was becoming a community resource. The $35,000 Thomas had set aside for me remained largely untouched. I used a small portion to fund a scholarship at the elementary school, where I taught, awarded annually to a student who demonstrated exceptional kindness to classmates. The Thomas Wilson Kindness Scholarship became my way of ensuring his values lived on. Catherine eventually began dating a kind widower from her Tai Chi class, approaching the relationship with cautious optimism. Thomas would want me to be happy, she told me over lunch one day. It took me a long time to accept that. As for me, I had learned lessons about family values and resilience that no inheritance could have purchased. I discovered that walking away from conflict sometimes requires more strength than engaging in it. I learned that true wealth lies not in bank accounts, but in how we treat others and ourselves. Most importantly, I realized that Thomas's legacy lived on not through his material possessions, but through the values he had instilled in me. Each time I showed patience with a struggling student, stood up for what was right, despite pressure to conform, or chose kindness over bitterness, I honored his memory more truly than any inheritance could have. What would you have done in my situation? Would you have fought for the inheritance, or walked away like I did? I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments. If this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe to show your support. Share it with someone who might be facing difficult family decisions right now. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember that sometimes the most valuable inheritance is not what is in a will, but what is in your heart.